In our world, it is not uncommon to hear people disagree about whether to believe in God or not. Today, when people talk about whether one should believe in God or not, it is not uncommon that people will begin to talk about this as a question of science versus faith. Some people, especially atheists who do not believe in God, will claim they are people of science. They put their trust in science. They say this to contrast that against faith. In fact, in some discussions that I have been in, people often treat science as the logical path or the path of reason, and faith as the path of the less logical or not thoughtful. Some of these people even sometimes pride themselves that they are not people of faith, but of science. In this short video, I want to share with you what science is and what faith really is. I also want to talk about the real limits to science. And most importantly, I want to show you how everyone is a person of faith, even those who say they are not. To know the difference between science and faith, we must first ask, how do we know what we know? The way we know things are by direct experience. There are two ways we can know things. The first is objectively. The second is subjectively. We can objectively know things by experiencing them with one or more of our five senses: hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching. For instance, one might say, I saw the accident. When we speak of subjectively knowing something, we are talking about our feelings, opinions, and thoughts. For instance, if one says, I love my wife. Anything we do not directly experience becomes a matter of belief. In other words, we choose to believe evidence brought to us, or we choose to believe the testimony of others. Belief, of course, is another word for faith. So we either know things by direct experience or by faith. Faith is a matter of degree. This means the person does not know with 100% certainty that it is true. But the more evidence they have, the more likely they are to believe it. When people have a large amount of evidence or very trustworthy testimonials from others for believing, they would have strong reasons for believing and would have a reasonable or logical faith. If they have a lack of evidence for belief or questionable testimonials, then one may call that an unreasonable or blind faith. Science is objective or empirical, meaning it can be verified with the five senses. And indeed, science is a great thing. It is a vital way in which we study and learn about our world. However, the truth is that science has limitations. Science uses the scientific method that relies on empirically researching and testing a subjective hypothesis. Scientists test hypotheses using experimentation. The goal is to find objective evidence to either support or fail to support their hypothesis. Because science is empirical, science cannot answer every question. Science is not designed to answer every question. Science has limitations. For instance, science cannot tell you if you truly love someone. Science cannot answer that question because it is tied to how you feel. This is a subjective question, and science cannot answer that. History is another great example of how limited science is. Science cannot answer what for sure happened in the past, especially when something happened in the distant past. When it comes to investigating things that happened in the past, science may help provide evidence which can serve as clues to what may have happened, but it can never provide 100% certainty. For this reason, science cannot be used to tell us with certainty what happened in the past. Let's consider this more closely. For instance, if a murder victim was found with a gun on the ground not far away, science could tell us that the victim was killed by a gun and if the bullet wounds matched the bullets in the gun. Additionally, let's say fingerprints were found on the gun and they matched a suspect. Based on the forensic evidence, using good science, we would have strong evidence to suggest the person whose fingerprints were found on the gun was the murderer. This may be enough to convict the person. Certainly it would cause people to believe that person is the killer. But do we have 100% certainty that the person actually killed the victim? I mean, what if the person whose fingerprints were on the gun were there before the actual killer used it? Or perhaps the person picked up the gun after the murder and left his or her fingerprints on it. This is the point of how science can help find evidence or clues to tell us the story of what happened in the past, but it can never tell us with 100% certainty. This is even more true the further back in time we look. For instance, children who learn history in America learned that on the night of December 25th into the 26th of 1776, George Washington crossed the Delaware River with military forces to attack the British. But how do we know this happened? I was taught this story when I was young. How do I know for sure it is true? I don't. I believe it is true. I read it in a school textbook and had a teacher tell me in 7th grade that it happened, and I believed them. I put my faith in this story. Now, none of us were there to witness it. Can science prove this event occurred as we were taught? Perhaps it could give us some evidence, but how much could it give us? I mean, what if we found a boat that claimed to be the boat Washington's army used, and we found Washington's DNA in it? Would that prove it? Well, it would prove at some point Washington was in contact with that boat, but really there's no way to say if he was in that boat crossing the Delaware River with his army on Christmas night in 1776. The best we can do with this story is either choose to believe or not believe the eyewitness testimonies from that time. This means it is a matter of faith, and all history becomes a matter of faith. Because historical questions come down to finding ancient accounts or archaeological evidence, we never can really know with 100% certainty if what a historical account says is fully accurate. We must choose whether we believe the account and its evidence or not. We put our faith in historical accounts. History generally is a question of faith. So you see, anyone who says they know certain things happened in history, especially ancient history, and were not themselves there to witness the events, really what they're saying is that they believe those things took place. They are expressing faith that those historical events occurred. You see, everyone is a person of faith. So even if the person is an atheist who strongly values science, in order for them to believe in historical events, they also make use of faith. Because the truth is, we are all people of faith. It is impossible to live and function in this world without faith. We all make plans for the short-term and long-term future, yet none of us know if we will truly live another day. We make plans believing we will live for the short and long term, not knowing really if we will. This is an act of faith. In fact, every time you sit in a chair, it is an act of faith. Do you really know for sure the chair will hold you up? Is it possible for the chair to have a weak or wobbly leg? Of course. Though rare, sometimes chairs do break or give way to the weight of a person. But how many people inspect the legs of a chair before sitting down each time? Very few, if any. We just believe it will hold us up, and we sit down. This is faith. We are all people of faith, and we all live by faith. So you see, when people talk about whether to believe or not believe in God, that whole narrative that this is a question of science versus faith is completely false. Science cannot logically address a question like that. And it is not even designed to answer a question like this. Rather, whether to believe or not in anything, especially the topic of God, is a question of faith. To take this further, consider when we begin to discuss the origins of everything. This is a question of history, because we have no eyewitnesses of those events. Now, perhaps science can help us find clues or small evidence, but the answer to the origins of everything are locked away in the past. And for that reason, this is a historical question, which means that it too is ultimately a question of faith. In conclusion, when people question if God is real or not, they are really asking if they should or should not believe in God. This means to believe or not believe in God is always a question of faith, not a question of science. In fact, there are many scientific-minded people who believe in God, because to believe in God or not is not a question of science, but of faith. In our next video, we will explore this further. If you enjoyed this video, check out our next video from Journey for the Truth about why to believe in God, and you will find out why it takes more faith to be an atheist than to actually believe in God.